Hey friends, and welcome back to today's episode. This is the third episode in a series about why you should care about seasonal living. Why do you need to care about what season it is? Does that really do anything for you? Is it really that big of a deal? And yes, so far we've talked about in episode 53 the different impacts on your health that learning to live seasonally can have. In podcast 54, in episode 54, we talked about some of the benefits having to do with the goals and the priorities that we have, and how we have certain times of the year where it's smarter to make a bunch of goals, and it's smarter to do at other times of the year just times of rest and reflection. Today I want to talk to you about something that is a real big buzzword and also a trigger word for a lot of people, and that is balance. And I want to talk to you about how seasonal living teaches us elemental medicine, and how elemental medicine itself can really help us to find balance in a holistic sense that is truly sustainable. So this is what I hear from a lot of folks. I hear, Erin, if I feel like I'm killing it in my career, then I'm definitely failing as a mom. But if I'm doing great as a mom, I feel like I'm completely dropping the ball with my career, right? Or I hear, I feel like I'm too much and not enough all at the same time. Or I hear, I'm not the dad I want to be, but I love my career and I don't know how to prioritize my time. I don't know how to find balance with that. Or I hear, how do you find balance with your health? How do you find a healthy balance with food? How do you find a healthy balance with movement? How do you find a healthy balance between knowing all of the things about health and becoming obsessed with those things to an unhealthy extent? So I think that balance is just something that is inherently difficult for the vast majority of us. And when we are doing well in one area, we always have the sense that we're dropping the ball in another area. We are always feeding this self-talk of inadequacy in certain areas. And this leads to, once again, constantly being in a shame spiral, which is something I want to invite us to exit now through the idea of seasonal living, through the idea of the cycle of the year, through the idea of the fact that nature is our model because we are part of nature. And when we look at nature, nature is never the same day to day, and nature takes advantage of certain activities in certain seasons and not taking part in certain activities during certain seasons. We can't do everything all at once. And so for a lot of us, that means embracing different seasons of our lives. And I hear a lot of people waxing poetic about that stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean it makes us feel better. And what we're all really looking for is that sense of inner peace, that sense of inner calm, that sense of groundedness, that sense of knowing who we are and knowing that how we're spending our time is meaningful, is fulfilling, and is really making the biggest bang for our buck, because we got one shot at this thing, right? So I want to talk to you about how seasonal living can help with this. Now, on our last podcast, I talked for a long time about how giving ourselves grace to experience the ebb and flows of life and adjusting our expectations is one of the precursors to learn to live seasonally. And for those of us that are real driven, those of us that like to stay on top of everything all the time, that want to appear that we have it all together all the time, this is going to be hard for you. And I say that as a person who personally has had to let go of a lot in order to live more seasonally. But for as much control, quote unquote, because control is only ever an illusion, really, as much control as we think we have over things, actually the real power in living comes from what we can let go of. And this is what seasonal living teaches us. It teaches us that we don't have to be all things to all people in all moments at all times. So I want to first invite you to just take a deep breath in and out and let go of any unhealthy expectations that you're holding for yourself or for others. Because everyone else is in this same boat too. Everyone else is struggling with the idea of balance. Everyone else is struggling with whatever their particular challenge points are. And what's cool about seasonal living is that it teaches you how to leverage what you have to leverage in any moment, whether it's your natural giftings and talents or your natural tendencies, or conversely, to be aware of where your weaknesses are, and to be aware of where those challenge points are going to be, and to figure out what you can do to support yourself in those areas. Now, when we're talking about the cycle of the year, when we're talking about the seasons, just like we all have different giftings and different areas where we're not so good, each season has its gifts and each season has its challenge points. It's areas that are going to go a little bit out of balance, if you will. So right now in North Dakota, where I live, it is a high wind advisory. It's awful. And it is something that is inherent in the beginning of spring and the beginning of fall season. It's the really erratic weather, right? Yesterday, it snowed, it rained, it was calm and still and beautiful, and we could go out for a walk. And then horrible winds that happened all in one day. Do you ever feel like your moods are like that? Do you ever feel like your commitment levels are like that? Well, nature has times that are like that too. So when we can see that, we can see, okay, there are outside influences that are influencing nature, so that there are these erratic things that are happening, but also it's something that kind of naturally occurs. And when we can learn to ride the wave of that, we're already going to be one step in the direction of balance. However, each season has different elements that are going to be strong in that season, and certain elements that are going to be maybe less prominent, let's say, in that season. So when we're talking elements, I'm talking about, from Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, Greek philosophy. There's a lot of different cultures on this planet that have a concept of the elements. Now, they may not all be the same exactly across the board, but there's some real similarities between how those different cultures have conceived of the elements and what they mean. So we're talking fire, we're talking air, we're talking earth, wood, water. All of these elements, if you look at what they are in nature, it tells you the nature of the element. Okay, so water, real heavy element, feels like inertia, right? So if you've ever been on a beach and you tried to go for a jog while you were wading through the water, that's the idea of water element. It's kind of has a sense of drag to it. However, it's so vital for life. It's so vital. We cannot live without water. It's an element that is real prominent in the season of winter. This should maybe be obvious, because in winter, very often we have a lot of snow, we have a lot of cold, we have a lot of more rest, we tend to be more sedentary, right? All of these things are indicative of certain aspects of water element. Now let's look at the opposite element. We have fire. Obviously summer, it's our hottest time of year. We get sunburned. We might get overheated. We might notice that our metabolism, though, amps up and increases during the summer. We might notice that we have more energy, more creative drive for projects, for accomplishing things, for productivity, for getting things done. So as much as the element of fire could be a negative in excess, in the right amounts, it's actually bringing us what we need in summer to take in the right amount of vitamin D to stay healthy, to get a bunch of stuff done so that we can actually rest in the winter, and so on and so forth. The elements are meant to be cyclical in nature, different seasons. Each season has its own element that's prominent. And because of its prominence, it may also tend to get out of balance during that season. And that means that we learn to bring in the opposite element to balance that out. Now, all of these same elements show up in our bodies. And yes, water is literally in our bodies, but for the most part, we don't think of the elements in our bodies as a literal presence. It's more like we look at in nature how that element behaves in nature, and then we look at our bodies and say, I noticed lately that I feel real lazy. I feel like I'm not motivated, and I feel kind of like I'm moving through life in slow motion. I might be experiencing excess water element right now. Or conversely, man, lately I realized that my temper is just totally out of control. I'm flipping out at people. I feel hot all the time. I notice that my skin's breaking out, and I just feel super agitated. Okay, so this is a manifestation, you can say, of excess fire element. So when you begin to see and observe, and the word observe is a real important word when it comes to learning elemental medicine and elemental balance. When you begin to observe in nature how the elements behave, you begin to be able to shine the mirror back on yourself then and say, okay, what is going on in my body then? What is going on in my psyche right now in terms of the elements? And once you know that, you can begin to bring in different tools to help to enhance the opposite element that is out of balance. And it's really that simple, but it's something that takes quite a bit of understanding to learn. And this is why I encourage people to start with something like a quarterly check-in. And I like to do my check-ins on the equinoxes and solstices. And again, if this is the first episode you're listening to, welcome. I have a free spring check-in printable that you can print off. It's 2 pages. You can go to bit.ly/spring equinox printable to print it off. And that printable is going to help you to go through your goals, your priorities, and your gratitudes from the previous season, what you want to get out of this current and coming season. But then the second page is an Ayurvedic routine, and a routine that's inspired by the teachings of Ayurvedic medicine. And those teachings help us to make little tweaks, little different lifestyle hacks at different points in the year to help with that elemental balance. And you're going to be with that helping to balance your body's elements without even realizing it, just by making a few simple changes. But beyond that, learning a bit more about the elements and how the lenses of some of these ancient wisdom traditions can help us to understand them better, can really give us a foundation to understand this elemental medicine a little bit better, because it is, for a lot of us, something that is a totally new way of looking at things. And so for that reason, I created an intro to seasonal living course for you. And this course can be found in the show notes. I'm going to put a link for you. It is all about how Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, and also the modern art and science of aromatherapy can help us to start to understand the elements and elemental balance. For those of you who want to dive in and just learn it, that's why I created the Intuitive and Seasonal Living Academy, where myself and my collaborator, Corianne Faith, have created a whole season of teaching for you that you can do at your own pace, that teaches you from these lenses of ancient wisdom the details of how to implement a lifestyle that helps you to achieve more of a sense of elemental balance. And when we find elemental balance, we're going to start to notice that we feel more balanced in our life overall. Those places where we feel stuck, we start to feel movement, and the places that feel out of control, we start to feel more peace. And who doesn't want those two things? So I really encourage you to check out the Intuitive and Seasonal Living Academy. Spring season is open. This is a great time to jump into it to get yourself reset and ready to go for spring. Or you can save by bundling the whole year at once. And I am going to put all the information in the show notes for you about that. But for now, I want you to just sort of soak in this information, go check out those links, and start to observe. Start to observe what's happening around you in nature, and start to notice, if you notice, any similar things that are going on in your emotional body, in your mental body, in your physical body, in your spiritual body. I'd love to hear about it in the comments below, and thank you so much for joining me. If you found this interesting, please do share it, as I feel that more people deserve to live a holistic lifestyle with ease. And I also appreciate those 5-star reviews. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, and I'll see you next time.